Haruto Amakawa, a 20-year-old young man, was on a bus in Tokyo, reminiscing about moments from his past. Years ago, due to his parents' divorce and subsequent relocation, he had to separate from Miharu Ayase, his childhood friend. He had promised to find her again when he was older, marry her, and protect her even if it meant sacrificing his life. Years had passed since that memory, and now, still on the bus, Haruto became distracted when he noticed a young girl staring at him intently. However, within seconds, the bus lost control and ended up in a terrible accident, colliding with a train. Haruto recalled the words he had spoken to his childhood friend, and then he woke up, confused, in the body of a boy named Ryo. Now he found himself in an old house in the kingdom of Bertram in the year 991. Dazed, the memories of both his past life as the protagonist and the world he now inhabited started to mix. But his confusion was interrupted by a group of men who apparently lived in the house. One of them told Ryo that he thought the fever would have killed him by now. Afterward, he instructed one of his companions to carefully place a sack he was carrying on the floor. Then the group prepared to eat, causing Ryo to feel hungry, but the men did nothing but chase him away, saying he smelled. Ryo left the house and set out to search for berries while reminiscing about the life of Haruto Amakawa, a boy who lived in Japan and attended university. He also remembered that Haruto had died in a traffic accident, but he wasn't even sure what that meant anymore. After all, these were things that did not exist in the world he now lived in. He interrupted himself, asserting that he was Ryo, a child living in a squalid, low-income neighborhood, determined to one day avenge his mother. Shortly thereafter, a group of girls, accompanied by a woman, rudely asked him if he had seen a girl his age with purple hair. Ryo replied that he hadn't, prompting one of them to approach him and tell her companions not to expect him to answer if they asked in that manner. She introduced herself as Celia Claire and kindly asked if he knew anything about the girl they had mentioned. Ryo, calmer now, repeated that he didn't know anything. Celia then asked him about the lower district. However, Ryo advised her not to go there, as it was a dangerous place, especially for a girl dressed so elegantly. He mentioned that people there usually wore rags. Therefore, the group's leader, Vanessa, told Celia they would come back to search after changing their clothes. She also asked Celia to check for any nearby magic just to be sure. After casting a spell, Celia scanned the area. She was surprised to see that Ryo emitted a significant amount of mana, indicating that he had the potential to use magic. Ryo was astonished by the blue aura he was emitting while Celia confirmed there were no other sources of mana nearby. She gave Ryo a bag of silver coins and thanked him for the information before leaving with her companions. Seeing so many silver coins, Ryo hurried back home, but as soon as he entered, he was attacked. He noticed that all the men who lived there had been murdered by the masked man, who threatened him with a knife. Before being attacked again, time stops, and he hears a voice calling him Haruto, telling him they don't have time. Ryo sees a girl with long hair floating, who tells him she will teach him odd and how to use his mana. She explains that he only needs to memorize that sensation, sharpen his senses, and use the light surrounding him to become stronger. The vision breaks, and time resumes. Ryo manages to dodge the attack and counters with a strike. Combining Haruto's strength and Ryo's newfound ability, the protagonist manages to fight until he knocks out the masked man. After everything is over, he notices that the sack the men left on the floor earlier has started moving. Upon untying it, as he suspected, it was the purple-haired girl he had heard about. Frightened, the girl asks him to take her to the castle, promising that her father will reward him for helping her. After seeing one of the corpses in the house, the girl screams and faints. Ryo decides to carry her and take her to the castle, but to his misfortune, he encounters the group that was searching for her earlier, and they misunderstand the situation. They take Ryo to the castle, where he must explain what happened, while Flora Bertram, the kidnapped princess, recovers. Meanwhile, the house where the incident occurred is being investigated, and they find someone who is still alive. Alfred Emerald, the king's sword, orders him to be detained, as he could be an accomplice in the kidnapping. However, a hooded man observing from the crowd shatters a gem, causing the suspect to die immediately. Back at the castle, the vice-captain of the royal guard ignores the orders for a peaceful interrogation. He wants Ryo to admit his involvement in the kidnapping of the second princess. The vice-captain beats him multiple times, but despite this, Ryo continues to deny any involvement, insisting that he has nothing to do with it. Some time later, Princess Flora wakes up and clarifies the situation, requesting to see Rio. Vanessa and Celia head to the interrogation room to find Rio badly injured. Vanessa confronts the vice captain, stating that he had ordered a peaceful interrogation, but he was aware of it. After confirming that Rio is free from suspicion, they release him, and Celia heals him with magic. Some time later, Rio wakes up in a room in the royal palace, accompanied by Celia, who apologizes for everything that happened. Celia informs him that he will be granted an audience with the king to thank him in person. Therefore, Rio asks her to teach him the protocols for addressing the king, to which Celia agrees without hesitation. Shortly thereafter, after dressing appropriately for the occasion, Rio heads to the audience where the king thanks him for saving his daughter. In addition, the king informs him that he will ensure he attends the Royal Academy of Bertram as a scholarship student. Days later, Rio begins his studies at the academy, where Celia would be responsible for teaching him how to read. However, he is not warmly welcomed due to his background and the fact that most of the students are children of royalty or nobility. Despite this, in a short time and with the help of Celia and the knowledge he already has from Haruto's university studies, Rio manages to excel at the academy. He not only excels in knowledge but also in strength, as Haruto used to practice kendo constantly. Therefore, Rio surprises his swordmaster with his fighting stance, and the swordmaster tells him that he has the potential to become a knight. However, Rio says he has no interest in becoming a knight, further surprising his master and classmates. Days pass, and Rio continues to study. After the exams, as he leaves the academy and observes the student atmosphere, he once again remembers Miharu. She was Haruto Amakawa's childhood friend, who separated from him when Haruto's parents divorced. Haruto finally saw her again in high school years later, but he only saw her that day, and she never returned to school afterward, as if she had disappeared. Rio snaps out of his thoughts, saying that it doesn't matter because Haruto Amakawa is dead. He reminds himself that he is now Rio, determined to live this life with strength and tenacity. The next day, the exam results are announced, causing a commotion among the students. It appears that Rio had tied for first place with Princess Christina Bertram. Alphonse Rodin, not pleased with this, confronts Rio, accusing him of cheating. However, Rona Fontaine interrupts, saying that envy is not befitting of a knight, and he has no proof of his accusations. Celia arrives to clarify that she witnessed Rio's score as a result of his own efforts, which further angers Alphonse, and he leaves. Rio tries to thank Christina and Rona for defending him, but they ignore him, saying they didn't do it for him. Shortly afterward, Celia tells Rio that she's worried about the criticism and offensive comments from the students. However, he assures her that as long as she is his friend, he will be fine because she will always be willing to help him when he needs it. Time passes, and now, 5 years later, in the year 996, the students are lined up, awaiting the announcement of the participants in the tournament, which will be held alongside the kingdom's knights. The master proceeds to name 3 students from different years, including Alphonse Rodin and Rio. Alphonse quickly protests upon hearing Rio's name, saying it's unacceptable for someone of his kind to participate in the tournament with the knights. He adds that Rio cannot use magic, and it would be a total disgrace. However, the master tells him that the decision has been made, and he won't accept complaints. Celia and Rio continue their tradition of drinking tea and conversing frequently, but now Rio is taller than her. Celia asks him about his plans after graduation, and Rio tells her he plans to travel to his parents' homeland, Yagumo. It's the place his mother promised to take him before she died, where his grandparents live. Days later, the tournaments between the knights and the academy students begin. The first participant is Rio, who is surprised to find himself facing Charles Arbeau, the member of the royal guard who humiliated and tortured him when he first arrived at the palace. Alfred Emerald, the tournament referee, is puzzled by Rio's unusual posture and the fact that he doesn't even use a shield. Nevertheless, he announces the start of the duel. Charles charges at Rio with fury, recalling that it was because of him that he was punished with a demotion 5 years ago. Rio calmly blocks the attacks, also remembering the humiliation from 5 years ago. Celia is surprised to see that Charles is fighting seriously, even though it's against a student. However, shortly afterward, Rio manages to win the duel with a single move, disarming Charles. Charles tries to make excuses, saying that he would fight seriously this time, but Alfred reprimands him, making him accept defeat. Later that day, Charles complains about his failure, telling the ambassador from the Proxia Empire about Rio. The ambassador inquires about him, and Charles tells him that 5 years ago, he interrogated Rio as a suspect in the kidnapping of Princess Flora. The said ambassador then remembers the day he was among the crowd, ensuring that no witnesses remained alive. The next day, Celia was waiting for Rio to celebrate his victory. However, when she sees him, she notices he's heading to an unusual place, so she decides to follow him. As she watches where he's going, she hides behind a tree and sees a girl give him a love letter, sparking new feelings in Celia. Despite this, the days pass, and she continues teaching at the academy as usual. All the students learn magic, assuming that Rio is the only one who can't use it. What they don't know is that Rio can use a different kind of magic, albeit in a non-traditional way, which he keeps hidden. While the students normally use formulas, Rio simply replicates spells by imitating the flow of magic. After the magic control class ends, the students prepare for an outdoor exercise where they have to traverse a mountain filled with monsters. Stuart Huguenot, who strongly dislikes Rio, tells him that despite being a burden who can't use magic, he has the perfect job for him, carrying everyone's luggage during the exercise. As always, Rio accepts without any issues, remaining calm. Princess Flora, who has long witnessed the unfair treatment Rio receives, asks if she can help him. Rio appreciates her consideration but kindly declines her offer, leaving Flora with no choice but to continue walking with the group, still concerned for Rio. Flora tries to bring up the matter with her sister Christina, but they are interrupted by the appearance of goblins. The group goes on alert, but Alphonse reassures the team, saying that the goblins aren't that strong. So, in a short time, they manage to defeat each one. Stuart boasts about how easy it was and says they need monsters that are more of a challenge. Alphonse agrees and tells him that he was a great help, unlike Rio, who did nothing and was distracted instead. Little did they know that Rio was distracted by something in the forest, suspecting something amiss. Nevertheless, he apologizes and rejoins the group. Meanwhile, hidden among the trees is the ambassador from the Proxia Empire, surprised to see that Rio sensed his presence and nearly discovered him. Seeing how exceptional Rio is, he decides to continue testing him to uncover his true capabilities. The group of students continues along the path and manages to exit the forest. However, they come across a cliff. The students don't know what to do in the face of this unexpected obstacle, and Christina tells Alphonse that she awaits his instructions since he is the commander. Alphonse has no idea what to do, but before saying anything, they are unexpectedly attacked by orcs. The students go on the defensive, dodging the enemy's spears, but one of them manages to graze Stuart's leg. Stuart reacts poorly to this, exclaiming in pain and stumbling into one of his fellow students who pushes him away. However, when pushed, Stuart collides with Princess Flora, causing her to fall off the cliff. Rio reacts immediately, leaping into the abyss and catching her. Then, using his magic, he sends her back up, while he falls into the forest below. He remains in the forest, wondering if the students would later suspect when they see that he didn't sustain any injuries. He wouldn't know how to explain his abilities, as he doesn't even know what they are. He only knows it's not magic or a spell. His thoughts are interrupted by the distant arguments of the students. After managing to defeat the orcs, they argue about finding the culprit who pushed Princess Flora. Stuart, entirely defensive, claims that someone else is to blame, only to end up saying that Rio is the culprit. He asserts that, out of fear of the orcs, Rio pushed him despite being injured, causing him to collide with Princess Flora. Alphonse tries to cover up Stuart's lie, saying that Rio later saved her out of fear of being accused of killing her. Princess Flora tries to intervene, clarifying that it's not what happened. However, Rio, who was listening closely, knows that things are spiraling out of control. Stuart managed to get the other students to support him, lying and saying they were witnesses to his testimony. After seeing this, Rio knows he can't go back, and he won't be able to graduate from the academy as he had planned. The students decide to leave, but Princess Flora says she won't leave without finding Rio first. Christina tells her to calm down and that they'll send a rescue team later, but she is interrupted by the roar of a much larger beast than the orcs. An armed minotaur, much stronger than anything they have faced before. Seeing that none of their attacks harm it, the students disperse, attempting to flee. Princess Flora stays behind to heal an injured, unconscious student, so the minotaur approaches her and tries to attack. But Rio steps in, blocking the attack and cutting off one of the minotaur's arms. The princess is surprised and relieved to see that Rio is okay, but he tells Flora to flee with the student. After Flora moves away, she watches in amazement as Rio battles the Minotaur. Rio attacks, not entirely understanding why he had jumped to her aid again, but despite this, he focuses and eventually manages to defeat the Minotaur. Afterward, he runs off, while the man responsible for all these trials observes from the air, thoroughly entertained. He wonders if Rio, with his dark hair, might be a descendant of someone from Yugumo, as that would explain why he could use spiritual magic so exceptionally. Later that day, Celia hears what happened and learns that Rio disappeared. Despite Princess Flora defending him, due to the Duke of Huguenot's persuasions, the Academy had no choice but to blame Rio. At night, Rio secretly visits Celia, as she was the only person he wanted to say goodbye to. Celia asks if he's leaving for Yugumo, which Rio confirms, saying he will send her letters frequently using a pseudonym. Celia asks what pseudonym he will use, to which Rio responds that he will write under the name Haruto. After a farewell hug, Rio finally leaves the academy, leaving Celia in tears as she remembers the day she met him. Meanwhile, somewhere in the palace dungeons, Charles Arbeau was giving his next target to Latifa, a young girl trained to be an assassin. Charles hands her a piece of Rio's clothing and describes his appearance, instructing her to kill him as soon as she sees him. 3 days later, Latifa stealthily pursues Rio in the Garlark Market, located in the city of Amand. Rio senses her presence and becomes alert, but thanks to Latifa's skills in hiding, Rio fails to see her and decides to ignore it. Shortly after, he discovers a noodle stall, which surprises him as it's a type of food he had never seen in this world. The stall owner explains that it's an invention of the ruler of Amand, Lisalot Krisha. Rio decides to buy a large quantity of noodles for his journey and heads to the Rika Merchant Guild. After obtaining everything he needs, he finally embarks on his long journey, and after a while of walking, he comes across an unconscious girl on the road. He tries to help her, but as he approaches, she shoots a poison dart at him and jumps to attack, revealing herself to be Latifa. Rio quickly dodges, with his vision somewhat blurry, leaves his baggage on the ground, and stops the poison with his spiritual magic. Latifa continues to attack aggressively. However, in a short time, Rio manages to render her unconscious. Upon observing her more closely, he notices that she has a slave collar. He then remembers reading in a book a way to remove such a collar, so he attempts it and successfully removes it. In the meantime, Latifa had nightmares about her time in the palace dungeons. She had awakened there 5 years ago with the memories of Suzune Endo, the girl who paid special attention to Haruto before the bus accident. After that accident, she woke up in Latifa's body and was tortured and trained by Stuart Huguenot for those 5 years. Upon waking from her nightmare, Rio informs her that he has freed her from the collar, which means she no longer has any reason to follow orders or return to her master. Rio asks her some questions and confirms that the person who sent her works for Stuart. After this, Rio prepares to continue his journey, resigned to the fact that Latifa will follow him since she didn't want to be alone. They travel together for days, and Rio realizes that Latifa comes from the same world as Haruto, just like him. He notices this because during one of her nightmares, Latifa mentions the name Tokyo in a whisper. Latifa, shortly after, also notices a resemblance between Rio and the boy she saw on the bus, which she observed closely because he reminded her of her brother. Neither of them says anything about it, and Rio allows Latifa to call him brother, because she called him that a couple of times accidentally, and he thought she must really miss him. Time passes, and they come across a large forest where in the distance, there is a huge tree protected by magic. Rio asks Latifa several times if she can see it, but she assures him that all she sees is a common forest. Both of them venture into that forest, where one night, Rio is attacked by a group of 4 half-human girls. Rio is blinded, so he can't see his attackers, but thanks to his spiritual magic, he manages to dodge their attacks. He tries to communicate, which almost works until one of the girls sees Latifa sleeping in the tent. Thinking that Rio is a kidnapper, the half-human girls take him by surprise and render him unconscious with an electric attack. After some time of being unconscious, Rio wakes up in an unknown place, chained. Shortly after, Latifa runs to him, crying, followed by the 4 girls who had attacked him, who apologize and then remove Rio's chains. Ursula, a member of the Council of Elders, also appears, clarifying that it was all a misunderstanding. The next day, the Council of Elders formally apologizes to Rio, and as compensation for all the inconveniences, they allow him to make any request, to which Rio asks to stay in the village for a few days and to be taught to improve in spiritual arts. The Council of Elders gladly accepts, and before ending the meeting, the spirit of the world tree, Dryas, appears. A girl with long green hair, who says she senses the presence of a spirit inside Rio. She asks Rio if he has ever made a pact, but he tells her he doesn't remember anything. Dryas explains that pacts with spirits are a problem for humans because making them loses their ability to use magic. Rio then tells her that he is unable to use traditional magic, so Dryas decides to investigate further. In a few seconds, Dryas senses a large amount of odd in Rio, but is even more surprised to notice a completely different presence. She mentions that a humanoid spirit lives inside Rio, one that seemed to be asleep. This surprises the Council of Elders and confuses Rio, so Dryas explains that spirits that take on human forms, like her, are from the second highest category or higher. She also explains that spirits of higher categories used to be known as the 6 Great Spirits, but they disappeared 1,000 years ago after the Divine Demon War. Dryas tells the elders that the spirit sleeping inside Rio could be one of the 6 Great Spirits. Rio asks if there's any problem with it being of high category, to which Dryas replies that there isn't, but she tells him that the children in the village would surely make a big commotion, as she's only from the second highest category, and they already treat her like a deity. The elders say they will have to reconsider how they address Rio, not knowing whether they should call him a saint from now on. Rio seems confused, but they tell him not to worry, as they would simply start treating him even better. Then, Dryas takes him to the house where he would live with Latifa and 3 other village girls who would help take care of him. Time passes, and Rio learns a lot about spiritual arts, also spending quality time with the villagers, who teach him many more things. A year has passed since Rio and Latifa have been living in the village, and the people celebrate the Spirits Festival, where Dryas bestows a blessed kiss on Rio and Latifa, declaring Rio a recognized ally and Latifa a resident of the village. Later that day, the villagers continue to celebrate, and Rio tells Ursula that it was time to tell Latifa that he would be leaving soon. Meanwhile, once again, the ambassador of the Proxia Empire, Rhys Vulf, takes action. Along with an apprentice from the Celestial Lions, he ventures into a cave to search for the egg of an unknown creature. According to Rhys, this creature would help enhance the military potential of the Celestial Lions. Shortly after, they travel to the forest, and Rhys leaves the apprentice to guard the egg while he watches as creatures approach to find it. Leaving his apprentice as bait, Rhys heads to another cave filled with many more eggs, which he begins to steal without haste. Dryas notices reactions within the village's barrier, so some female warriors decide to investigate. They notice suspicious odd reactions near the point where Rhys left his apprentice, and as they approach, they spot him with a griffin. The warriors approach and try to talk, but the frightened apprentice runs to his griffin and flees. Sarah, the group's leader, gives permission to attack, as the griffin is heading towards the village. However, before it arrives, one of the creatures Rhys saw earlier chases it, seeking the egg the apprentice is guarding. The warriors also notice a flock of these creatures called wyverns, which are also pursuing the griffin. When Rhys finishes stealing the last egg in the cave, he breaks a small red gem, causing the apprentice to die instantly. Lifeless, the apprentice drops the egg into the forest, while the warriors prepare to battle the wyverns. Latifa walks through the forest, angry because Rio had already told her that he would leave soon and that she couldn't go with him. Her anger is interrupted by the sound of something breaking nearby, which, to her dismay, is the wyvern egg that the apprentice dropped when he died. A huge wyvern arrives shortly after and, upon seeing the broken egg, becomes enraged and goes out of control, greatly frightening Latifa. Rio, who sees the village evacuating after hearing the explanation of what's happening, hears Latifa's call in his mind, so he rushes off to find her in alarm. Alma, one of the warriors, arrives to save Latifa, but she's not strong enough. Despite Alma telling her to run, Latifa runs and calls to the beast, trying to distract it so it won't reach the village. However, before long, Latifa finds herself cornered, but just before being crushed by the wyvern, Rio arrives to save her. After leaving her in a safe place, he begins to attack the wyvern. Despite the beast's great strength, Rio manages to defeat it without using weapons, thanks to all he trained and learned during his year in the village. The other wyverns retreat after Rio defeated the largest one, and the rest of the warriors gather around him. Surprised to learn that Rio defeated that wyvern on his own, they thank him for saving the village. The next day, Rio tells Latifa the reason he's heading to Yagumo, and she makes amends with him. Latifa confesses that she was actually reborn in that world and that she used to be a human living in a place called Japan. Thinking that Rio wouldn't believe anything she said, she is surprised when he tells her that he went through the same thing. She asks him if he has any regrets from his past life, which makes Rio remember Miharu. But he tells her that he swore to become stronger to survive in that world, another reason why he wants to go to Yagumo. Latifa promises him that she will also become strong to meet him again someday and live in that world without regrets. The day finally arrives, and Rio prepares to leave the village, equipped with a mithril sword gifted by the dwarves. This sword can absorb spiritual arts and imbue itself with their power. He also receives a sturdy piece of clothing made from the black wyvern's hide that Rio defeated. From the elves, Rio receives secret remedies and elixirs, and from the beast folk people, abundant food and drink. One of the elders also gifts him a valuable space-time storage device in the form of a bracelet, which would facilitate his journey. With this device, Rio manages to store all his belongings within the bracelet. After everything is ready, Rio bids farewell, asking them to take care of his sister Latifa and not to hesitate to call him if they need help. 1 year later, after 2 weeks in Yagumo, Rio finds no clues about his parents, even though everyone there also has black hair. He decides to speak with the village leader, Yuba, and tells her he is looking for someone. Rio explains that he came to their village because he heard that Yuba knew more people in the area. The leader invites him in, prepared for a lengthy conversation. Ryo asks her about his parents, Zen and Ayame. After telling her more about it, Ryo is greatly surprised to learn that Yuba is Zen's mother. Yuba tells him that he did well to come to Yugumo, but that there's something she doesn't know how to explain to him. After taking Ryo to his parents' grave, Yuba explains that they had their reasons for secretly leaving the country. Ryo asks her what those reasons were, but Yuba says it's something she can't tell him yet. Then she asks Ryo if he'd be willing to stay in Yugumo until the time when she can tell him. Concealing his lineage from the rest of the village, Ryo decides to live in Yugumo for a while. After some time, he manages to get along with the villagers, surprising everyone with his advanced skills in spiritual arts. However, he also manages to arouse jealousy in Shin, one of the village boys, who claims that all Ryo does is show off. Despite this, they continue to live together normally until one day when Gon, the son of a neighboring village, arrives. He asks for accommodation because his cart broke down during his journey. Shin becomes defensive, sensing his true intentions. Gon shamelessly shows interest in Shin's sister, Seo, and also in Ruri, Yuba's granddaughter and Ryo's cousin. Before a fight breaks out, Yuba arrives and stops them, telling Gon he could stay in an outlying cabin with the condition that he doesn't leave it. Shin asks Yuba to let Seo stay in their house with Ruri since living alone wouldn't make her feel safe at home. Yuba agrees without any problem and warns everyone not to let their guard down. Later that night, before Ruri and Seo go to sleep, Ryo gives them an amulet to place in a corner of their room, which the girls do, thanking him with joy. Meanwhile, Gon talks to his companions in their cabin, revealing that intentionally damaging his cart was a success and that they could take as long as they want to repair it, then have fun in another way. The next day, Inspector Hayate Saga arrives with his assistants to examine the village. The day goes well without any inconvenience until night falls, and Gon begins to act. While Ruri and Seo are sleeping, he enters their room and threatens to harm them if they make any noise. However, shortly after, thanks to the amulet in the corner of the room, Ryo arrives, effortlessly pushing Gon's companions aside. Seeing Gon on top of Ruri, he somehow recalls his mother's murder, prompting Ryo to throw him out of the house. On the ground, Ryo approaches him and steps on his throat. Gon pleads for him to stop, but Ryo, almost in a trance, pays no heed. He removes his foot, only to begin repeatedly striking Gon in the face, splattering blood, as the horrified girls watch. This continues until Inspector Hayate emerges from the house due to the commotion and asks Ryo to stop before he kills him. Ryo steps aside without saying a word. Yuba also comes out and witnesses the chaos. Hayate explains that apparently Gon attempted to attack Ruri and Seo. After Yuba and the girls return to the house, Hayate begins healing Gon with magic, telling him that he committed a very serious crime. Ryo, who still hasn't spoken a word, walks away, thinking that it was the second time he wanted to kill someone for real. He understands that being Ryo, he has had that feeling for a long time, but without realizing it, he is getting closer to Haruto Amakawa every time. The next morning, Hayate announces that a messenger from the kingdom will arrive the next day, and Gon will be arrested along with his companions. Ryo apologizes for the trouble he caused, but Yuba tells him that he doesn't have to apologize and, instead, thanks him, as do Hayate and the girls. The next day, everyone sets off for the royal capital of the kingdom of Karasuki to sell the surplus rice after the annual tax and rations. After several days, the group finally arrives in the royal capital, where Gon is arrested, and Shin thanks Ryo for what he did for Seo. The following day, Ryo accompanies Seo for shopping, and then he tells her that her brother asked him to take her to eat kamutan, since Seo has never tried it, and Shin wanted to cook it at home. Seo says her brother is a big eater, but Ryo assures her that Shin just wants her to try it as a caring brother, so Seo agrees. Later, a vendor stops them to offer accessories, thinking they were a couple. Despite clarifying the misunderstanding, Ryo decides to give Seo a gift and ends up buying her a valuable flower kanzashi for her hair. Seo blushes when the vendor whispers that she shouldn't let a guy like Ryo go because she might have a lot of competition. Shortly after, Seo and Ryo continue on their way, but they hear a commotion as some thugs try to kidnap a young girl in the capital. Ryo acts swiftly, knocking out one kidnapper and holding the unconscious girl in his arms. The girl's guardian, after incapacitating another thug, approaches and apologizes to Ryo, as it was all her incompetence. Ryo hands over the girl and tells her not to worry, advising her to apologize to the girl when she wakes up. Before he can say anything more, Ryo decides to leave with Seo, wanting to avoid further trouble. In a short time, the news of a boy saving the young Komomo spreads, reaching Goki Saga, Inspector Hayate's father. Goki explains to Hayate that fortunately, the boy stopped the culprits but didn't linger at the scene. Setting the topic aside, Hayate hands his father a letter from Yuba, which she asked him to deliver when he saw him in person. Upon reading the letter, Goki is greatly surprised, and trembling, he asks Hayate if he had met someone named Ryo. Shortly after, Ryo and Seo arrive at the house where everyone is currently staying. Inspector Hayate doesn't take long to call Ryo, who joins him and his parents for a conversation. Goki introduces himself along with his wife, Kyoko Saga, and tells Ryo that in the past, they both served Ryo's mother, Ayame Karasuki. Seeing Ryo's astonishment, Goki explains that his mother belonged to the royal family of Karasuki. He tells him that over 20 years ago, the kingdom of Karasuki was at war with Rokoran, a neighboring kingdom. Ryo's father, Zen, who had a natural talent for spiritual and martial arts, was there as a volunteer soldier. The king quickly bestowed upon Zen the title of noble warrior and tasked him with showcasing his skills. Since his talent was genuine, Goki recommended him as a guard for the royal family, where he was entrusted with protecting Ayame Karasuki, who soon found herself attracted to Zen. Then, during the peace negotiations with the kingdom of Rokoran, at the celebration ceremony, the prince who had attended as an ambassador had his assistants kidnap Ayame. After Zen thwarted their plans by rescuing Ayame, the prince, resentful of losing an assistant, demanded Zen's execution to solidify the truce in a politically arranged marriage with Ayame. Ryo asks Goki if that was the reason his parents fled, and he confirms it, revealing that the king had secretly planned it all. Ayame and Zen left the country, and time passed without any news of them. Still, Goki emotionally recounts that after reading Yuba's letter and seeing Ryo's honorable countenance, he has no doubt that he is Zen and Ayame's son. The following day, at Goki's request, Ryo appears at the royal castle to meet the kings. He presents himself to King Homura and Queen Shizuku, who are easily surprised when they finally see their grandson. Ryo tells them about his parents and the little time they spent together. His father died when he was too young to remember, and his mother was always very kind but died when he was just 5 years old. His grandparents are surprised to hear this and ask Ryo how she died. Ryo hesitates for a few seconds and tells them it wouldn't be easy to hear, but his grandparents insist. Ryo recounts that his mother was killed in front of his eyes by a man named Lucius, who apparently worked with his father as an adventurer. He explains that Lucius had helped them a lot after his father's death, but one day, his mother left him alone at home, warning him not to open the door to strangers. However, upon hearing Lucius, he let him in because he already knew him. However, Lucius started attacking him and made him drink poison. His mother arrived, trying to protect him, but shortly afterward, Lucius stabbed her with a knife. Ryo tells them that this is the last thing he remembers before he passed out back then. Devastated, his grandparents ask him what he did afterward, and Ryo tells them that he woke up in the slums, where he lived as an orphan for a while. He then tells them everything he experienced from the age of 7, from his journey at the Bertram Academy to the moment he arrived in Yagumo. Ryo mentions that he still seeks revenge because it's the one thing he could never forgive. The king says he won't stop him but asks him to first fight Goki, Karasuki's best warrior. This is to ensure he's strong enough to defeat Lucius, who, being so powerful, could have also killed Zen. Ryo accepts, and as he steps out into the courtyard to face Goki, he encounters the young woman he had previously saved in the capital. Her protector, Aoi, recognizes him, surprised, and exclaims that the boy accompanying him was the one who saved Komomo, Goki and Kyoko's daughter. After such a surprise, the duel between Ryo and Goki begins. Goki is astonished by Ryo's skill. The duel becomes more difficult and serious as they both begin using spiritual arts, but in a quick strike, Ryo manages to win the duel. Everyone is completely amazed. The kings tell Ryo that he is more than prepared and wish him a safe journey. Days later, Ryo returns to the village and tells his cousin Ruri about his lineage. Closer to his family, Ryo lives in the village for a year. During this time, he learns that Seo is in love with him, but he tells her he cannot reciprocate those feelings. They part on good terms, and after saying goodbye to everyone, Ryo finally leaves the village, promising to return someday. Before returning to Bertram, Ryo decides to visit Latifa, returning to her house to stay for a few months. However, a few days later, Ryo wakes up screaming in his house, noticing that an unknown girl was sleeping in his bed, naked. The girls who live in Ryo's house are scandalized when they enter his room and see such a scene, but Ryo is as confused as they are. When he asks the girl who she is, she calls him Haruto and explains that she is the spirit he made a pact with. The girl asks him to give her a name, and upon seeing her, Ryo somehow remembers Miharu but decides to call her Aisha. Ryo takes her to the Council of Elders since the girl didn't retain her memories and didn't know what to do. Dryas appears, saying that it's unusual for Aisha not to remember anything but asks her in which element she specializes in spiritual arts. Aisha replies that she specializes in all of them, which surprises Dryas and the elders greatly. According to Dryas, a humanoid spirit that masters all elements is unheard of, so they need to find out how strong Aisha really is. Therefore, shortly after, Aisha and Rio engage in a great duel, but they are soon stopped by Dryas. Seeing the intensity of the fight, Dryas says that she could have put the village in danger if she had let it continue. Nevertheless, they confirm that Aisha does indeed master all elements, and despite this, Dryas says she only showed a fraction of her power. Dryas then decides to teach Aisha everything about spirits, and the elders welcome her to the village, which Rio appreciates. Months later, one of the elders finishes building a special house that Rio could store in his space-time storage. On that day, Rio talks to Latifa about his past life and discovers that she was the same girl in the bus accident. They both reveal their real names and strengthen their sibling bond, which comforts Latifa as she was saddened by Rio's impending departure. The next day, Rio is ready to leave, but not before receiving a valuable teleportation crystal from Ursula. The crystal is configured to bring him back to the village at any time, making his return easier. They explain that it only works in one direction, so he can't use it to return to his starting point, but it would still be very useful. Another elder gives him an earring that will allow Rio to change the color of his hair so that he won't be recognized by the authorities. Rio thanks them for all the gifts and leaves with Aisha, who now has enough knowledge about spirits thanks to Dryas. 2 years later, in the royal capital of Bertram, Rio is surprised to see so many people. After changing the color of his hair, he decides to ask a local about it. He is informed that it's because the grand wedding of a noble from the house of Duke Arbo is taking place the next day. Rio doesn't inquire further and decides to head to the academy with Aisha. However, upon arrival, he finds Celia's office completely empty. Using spiritual magic, Aisha manages to get information from someone at the academy. Rio discovers that the person marrying the noble the next day is Celia Clare, but Rio is even more surprised to learn that Celia was going to marry Charles Arbo. They explain that it will be a marriage of convenience because during the last conflict, the Proxia Empire defeated the kingdom of Bertram decisively. This was thanks to the actions of the Arbo family, and although they barely managed to initiate peace negotiations, the royal family lost all its authority. When the blame was placed on the Huguenot Duke faction, they had to leave the capital. So, the Arbo family took the opportunity to join forces with the Clare family to regain their strength. Not knowing if this was something the Clare family truly desired, Rio decides it's best to ask Celia in person. Aisha tells him that she will avoid the castle's magic detecting mechanisms to locate Celia. Shortly after, he finds her, and Rio infiltrates the castle for an emotional reunion with Celia, who cries tears of joy upon seeing him after 4 long years. However, when Rio asks her about the wedding, Celia becomes evasive and lies, saying it's something she decided on her own. She thanks Rio for visiting her before her wedding but asks him to leave. Rio has no choice but to exit the castle after her insistence. However, with Aisha's help, he decides to investigate the true reasons behind the wedding. The next day, wedding preparations are underway, and Reese arrives to personally congratulate Charles. But he stops chatting cheerfully and becomes alert upon sensing the presence of a powerful spirit. Charles notices his unease, but Reese tells him it's nothing and withdraws to the ceremony hall. Shortly after, to Celia's great surprise, Princess Christina arrives to visit her and offer congratulations instead of her parents. Celia's demeanor improves slightly after talking with her, but it returns to its previous state when the wedding begins shortly after, making it difficult for her to maintain a smile. Aisha communicates with Celia mentally, who is in a carriage waving to the people, and tells her that Rio asked her to talk to her in this way. Celia then searches the crowd and finds Rio watching. She instantly brightens up but starts crying as well, as Rio was the one person she didn't want to see her like this. Charles, who was in the carriage next to her, is startled to see her in this state. He later calms down, thinking they were tears of joy, but tells her to behave. After calming down, Celia asks Aisha mentally if she's still there, but she had already left. Celia, somewhat saddened, convinces herself that it was all an illusion and repeats to herself that she's a doll without feelings to keep her composure. The carriage finally arrives at the palace, and Charles offers his hand to Celia, who resignedly extends her hand to him. But before they manage to hold hands, a guard shouts, alerting everyone. Celia looks toward the commotion and sees Rio running straight toward her. Many guards and mages stand in his way, but Rio deals with each of them. After an order, Charles and Celia are protected by the kingdom's most advanced elite. Charles remains confident, reassuring Celia that it's all just a show. But he soon eats his words when he sees Rio quickly defeat the elite and deliver a strong blow to his chest, leaving him breathless. Charles falls to the ground, and Rio takes Celia, holding a knife to her throat. The entire kingdom is paralyzed, not knowing what to do. Rio keeps Charles on the ground and orders him to be quiet, threatening to break his spine if he tries anything. He then telepathically communicates with Celia, who looks worried, and assures her that he won't kill anyone and that it's all part of the distraction. Taking advantage of the chaos, Rio telepathically talks to Celia again, asking her once more what she wants. She tells him she had already made it clear, but Rio asks her to be honest since, after all, the House of Duke Arbeau has the House Claire under threat. Celia says it's excessive, and Rio doesn't deny it. But after remembering his mother, he tells Celia that he won't let them take away what matters to him again. He assures her that if she lets the wedding go through, she'll face a future where her dignity would be trampled on for the rest of her life. After discussing it, convinced, Celia agrees and asks Rio to get her out of there. Afterwards, Rio continues his performance, loudly exclaiming that he had decided to humiliate Charles by kidnapping his girlfriend. Then Rio jumps with Celia in his arms, running and disrupting all the soldier formations and blocking magical attacks. Among the palace audience, Reese observes, recognizing Rio for his skills and noting that he's much stronger than the last time he saw him. Reese, intrigued, launches a powerful magical attack purely out of curiosity and is surprised to see Rio block it, causing a huge explosion. After watching Rio emerge unscathed from such an attack and escape with Celia, Reese becomes even more interested in him and the spirit that never appeared. However, he can't do much more since he's protected by the royalty as an ambassador from the Empire, making it difficult to sneak away easily. Rio manages to distance himself enough from the pursuing aerial units, so he decides to descend to the village to continue his plan. He leaves Celia with Aisha, planning to buy time for them to leave the capital. While they escape, Rio runs, defeating many guards along the way and attracting attention, just as he had planned. However, Alfred Emerald, the king's sword, appears with the intention of stopping him. Rio faces him, noting how strong he is, but finds it difficult to fight while being careful not to kill him. Alfred notices that Rio is holding back, so he gets angry, thinking that Rio is underestimating him. Later, Alfred launches a huge magical attack with his sword, temporarily blinding everyone, only to realize that Rio has disappeared. Shortly afterward, Rio appears outside the capital to meet with Aisha and Celia, who were waiting for him, worried. Celia is happy to see him, and Rio assures her that he's fine, despite his clothes being very worn. After making sure that all three of them are okay, they start planning their journey. However, Aisha is startled when she realizes something. After saying, "They're coming," rays of different colors begin to emerge from various distant mountains. When these rays fade away, Aisha reacts and tells Rio to please help them while she takes care of Celia. Not fully understanding, Rio travels quickly. Meanwhile, somewhere in the mountains, a group of 3 Japanese students appears, not knowing where they are and with no signal on their cell phones. Shortly after, they are kidnapped by a group of bandits who lock them in carriages. Rio doesn't take long to arrive at the scene, and upon hearing the screams of the students, who to his surprise speak Japanese, he begins to kill the bandits one by one. After defeating them all, he frees the 2 students who are in one of the carriages. They tell him that their female companion was locked up in a different location, so Rio goes to investigate. When he checks another carriage, Rio is greatly surprised to find that the student inside is Miharu Ace, leaving their reunion as the final scene in this new life. And that's how the first season of this anime ends. If you've reached this part of the video, let me tell you that you've been one of the few people to make it this far. So comment the word magic in the comments. Remember to subscribe to not miss any videos. With that said, see you in the next video.